Hey there, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode of The Deliberate Zoomer, hosted by myself, Silas Maynor, and my good friend, Michael Simonton. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Who?
All right, everybody, welcome back to the show where Michael and I talk about stuff regarding your 20s, how to live your life, specifically your 20s, with intention, and how to set yourself on a trajectory for what you want to achieve. Today, we will be talking about whether to go to college or not, right? I know this is a pretty big debate, and it's like people have very strong opinions, especially in the praxis community, about college. But I think that it's important to have a discussion because there is definitely times that college is important and can be very useful. But there's also times, and I think it's with the, kind of the way that the world is right now, there's more times than not where it's not as useful. And so I'm going to hand it off to Simon initially here to discuss, to Michael, to discuss the kind of his background with college. He had a little bit of experience. I didn't go to college at all, so I have less experience to talk to on this. So I hand it off to you and let you go through your thoughts here initially.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'm Simon, short for Simonson. So yeah, absolutely worked great. College, there's a whole lot of differing opinions on it, especially like the more we progress, the more we see how less effective and how less efficient it is, and not necessarily like how it's working out. The more these discussions will come up too. So I think it's an excellent topic. And from my thoughts on it, I'd start it off by saying, listen, college can be great. If you want to do that, if you think it's valuable for you, then go for it. Like, we're not telling you how to live your lives, but we aren't, and neither should your parents, or neither should those around you. So definitely do not feel peer pressured into going into college at any given point in time. It is not a clear indicator of success. It's not an indicator of success. I mean, look at the Steve Jobs, the Mark Zuckerbergers, those individuals and like the people that dropped out of college and were very successful.
Especially, like, I definitely want to throw in Elon Musk's name, right? He started college and like he was a super bright guy, but obviously you got SpaceX all over you. So definitely have to mention Elon Musk.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's the point. Like, it doesn't mean it's not a make it or break it thing. Like it used to be, there used to be tons of arguments. I mean, I remember reading a paper in high school on like the benefits of college and how much you're going to earn throughout your life because you've been. And I'm realizing the older I get, the more people I talk to, especially in the startup communities, that it's not really true anymore. So times change. And that's something that I think, Silas, you're going to mention a little later on when it comes to the college and cost benefit analysis. But initially, my thoughts are college started out, what was the purpose? Why? So initially it meant that, these businesses, these institutions, not businesses, were putting their stamp of approval on you. They were saying, hey, Michael is good for X, Y, and Z. He's done our programs on this. We're speaking on behalf of them. He knows these things. He's valuable. He adds value in these fields. Now, what we've seen college become is everyone has a degree and no one has an experience. And quite frankly, the courses are getting more watered down. They're like full of just a bunch of extra bullshit, and it's not, in my opinion, really that worth it. I mean, I have my associates. I was very close to getting my bachelor's, and I said, screw it. It wasn't worth it to me anymore because I knew that where I wanted to go out of life and what I wanted to get, the experience was more important than a piece of paper. And another huge thing for me with college is you go and you see these kids and you see everyone, and they're there to check a box. They're not there to learn. And that's one of the main reasons why I dropped it, because I was like, I have a goal. I'm going to be a lifelong learner. I don't need to sit in a classroom to listen to these professors, teachers, read out of a textbook to me when I could just read the textbook on my own, learn on my own, and talk to people who've actually done this shit. And so that's what I did. And that's why I'm not a huge fan of college. One of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of college. But I think that might be a good place to start it. I'll pass it on to you, Silas, on what you think about that. And when it comes to experiences versus just sitting in a classroom.
Yeah, I think that just in general, I don't know how many people I feel like it's a very small portion. I definitely would like to see the data on this, but I assume that most people learn from experiences, right? They learn from experiences or from like having a conversation. So to me, and I'm in the recruitment space, so I see people all the time who they have a degree that is completely unrelated to what they're doing now, right? And it's because, and you talk to these people and it's incredible because they came to a point where they realized what they wanted to do with their life. And it was after college. It was after they got into the workforce. And a lot of them, obviously, like I definitely think that engineering and those type of roles, like that's good to learn those things. I specifically think, with the topic of, um, to me, this is interesting because I have a huge regard for Elon Musk, right? And I think you'll talk about that a little bit later. But um, electrical engineering would be a good type of thing to go for, right? If you want to become an electrical engineer, you're going to have work for years, and I think that there's definitely has to be benefits to you have to weigh the benefits and kind of roughly what you want. So piggybacking off of our last discussion with deciding what's important to you, if you can decide what's important to you and get a rough idea of where you want to head, I think that then you can use that to really decide whether or not you want to go to college, right? If you want to be somebody who works for somebody else, like you're not going to be an entrepreneur, you're not going to run your own business, then you should probably, there's a higher chance that you're going to want to go to college, right? And the thing that I also had when I was younger, when I was slightly considering college, is like, if I'm going to go, I had thought about also for a while going to be an architect. That was something I actually kind of wanted to do. I thought it'd be interesting. And I was like, if I'm going to go do this, I'm not just going to go to this place down the road and get an architecture degree. I would go to the most elite school that I could possibly get into in the entire world, not just limiting it to the United States. I would go as wherever I can, because the times that, and this is again part of what I've learned through being a recruiter, is the times that people's degree actually matters is when they've gone to the best school, because it's all about the reputation at that point. It's not about the person. Like obviously the person got into the school and went through the school successfully because of who they were. The school didn't change that. They just said, bam, you made it through our program. Like the best example I can say is like the Chicago Booth MBAs and the Kellogg MBAs. Like those guys, they have a little bit of benefit to it. But as far as cost benefit analysis, I know you mentioned that. I think that it's important to discuss this is depending on what you want to do with your life, depending on the things that are important to you, most of the time college is getting so outrageously expensive that it doesn't really pay that well. So I know that during the coronavirus here and this whole pandemic situation, I believe, who else was it? I know Google, and do you remember the other company that came out saying, we have a certification course that if you take this, we'll treat it as college. So you can just do this course and then we'll hire you as if you had a degree. Do you remember who the other company was?
I don't. But I also know IBM has a very similar program that they use. So
yeah, the point is these shorter, I think it's like a 6 month, sometimes even shorter boot camp or like certification that you can get to get some of the highest paying jobs, that are highest paying jobs in the industry, right? They're very good. Like being some type of software engineer, like these type of jobs, they're constantly growing. So those you can get into at a very low entry level rate. It's like, if you just care about getting into that and making a good living, you want to have enough to pay your bills and raise a family, etc., then don't go for the reason that's the highest cost of entry. Go for the low cost of entry where you get in and then you work hard and then you learn. And once you learn, then you can build a reputation as a really good individual and professional in leading your field in that regards. So I think it's just important in general, like, obviously, I'm not a finance expert, but when you're deciding whether or not to go to college, look at it from a really overall standpoint. What is the cost and what am I going to get out of it? And one thing that the personal MBA talks about, which is funny because he uses MBA terminology and MBA educations, like what they teach you in the school, to show you that the benefit of paying that much for an MBA in most cases doesn't actually turn out. So I think that it'd be worth looking if anybody's interested. Highly recommend reading that book, The Personal MBA. But yeah, I guess I'll flip back over to you to kind of take it from here.
Yeah, absolutely. So college, you want to know if you want to go. You need to know if you want to go. You need to know if you need to go. You want to know if it's the right choice for you, stuff like that. My defining moment, I guess, was I was working for SpaceX. That's the swag. And it was a lot of fun. I wasn't doing anything technical. I was making coffee for, these engineers and stuff. And I had worked out a whole 5-year plan around it. I was going to become a fab technician. I was going to work on, building out components that go on the vehicles and on the launch pads and stuff. And while I went to college for a degree in some sort of engineering that I could use and leverage, both my experience with SpaceX, but primarily the experience and also the degree to get a job as an engineer there and to keep moving my way up. But unfortunately, they did like a mass cutout, and turns out coffee is an essential. So that didn't last too long. However, during my time there, I got to spend, days on end. I'd have conversations with the engineers, and these geniuses that are, building out like the landing places for the Mars expeditions and like the potential like habitats where people would live. And surprisingly enough, a lot of these engineers, the ones that like the launch engineers and stuff, like they didn't really use their degree. They had an engineering degree. It gave them the understanding and stuff, but nothing of what they did today at SpaceX was gained specifically from their degree. It was from like general engineering knowledge and experience. And that blew my mind. And that was one of the reasons why I was kind of on the edge, on the board of college. I had a plan for it because I wanted to stick with SpaceX, and I knew that was the box I had to check there. But come the time when I got, let go, I realized that I was like, what is valuable to me is the experience and learning and growing. And that is best done outside of a classroom. For me, it's not something that I'm going to sit in a room and I'm just going to listen to people talk and to tell me about stuff that I could just go and do on my own. It's just so counterintuitive. Like, why take a class on writing when they're going to make you write 6 papers, 7 papers, whatever, throughout the course of the semester, when you could just go blog every day? How much more experience will you gain from writing every single day that you can do on your own than you would sit in the classroom writing like 8 papers a semester? Like that thoughts like that just blew my mind. And so I realized that, well, it's great for STEM fields. If you're looking to get into like different STEM programs, go for it. I think those have a valid case. But for the vast majority of everything else, it's a waste of time. It's not. It's a waste of time. Like I could go into a whole lot of other rants about it and stuff where I dive on those points. But at the end of the day, it's just not that valuable or essential as people make it out to be anymore. And that's good to know, especially starting your career in your life and trying to decide whether or not you should go, because it means you have options. And it doesn't mean you're locked into, I have to go to college for 4 years. I have to lock myself into $50,000 in debt just so I can start a career. You can do that without just college. And I think that's the point that needs to be made. And I'll turn it over to you on that note.
Yeah, I think it's good to focus on some of like the very basic things. Is for me, I've seen a lot of, I come from a large, we both come from large families. I don't know what I'm saying, I do. We both come from very large families. Michael's more so than mine even. And a lot of my cousins have gone to college or have like, they've just done these things, and it's just because everybody else does. At least that's what I felt like, because we all had very similar upbringing, but the rest of the world was going to college, right? They were all, once you're graduating high school, you're going to college. And I remember as I was, because I was, again, homeschooled, but once I had my graduation party, a bunch of people, asked me what I wanted to do and what college I was going to. I was like, no, I don't plan on it. And they were always shocked when I didn't say it, when I said I wasn't really planning on going to college. And I think that it's, obviously for people listening, especially if you're young, maybe you're just finishing high school and you're deciding, realize that this is not fair. What has been set up for us is you have your parents, everybody, society is essentially pressuring you to go do it because everybody else is doing it. Realize that that is not the case. You don't have to do it. Okay. We talked about this before, with deciding that you're in charge. You are in charge of your decisions of your life, including if you want to go to college or not. Now, I will say that a couple other thoughts I have on college in general is be sure that the industry you want to go into, like if you're going to do a specific focus, which I believe college should be, if you're going to go to college, you should have a very clear focus of, I want this, I'm going to focus on this so that I can get to this type of job. Okay, that should be a very clear focus, because if it's all over the place, it doesn't really benefit you. The benefit of it significantly reduces. So if you're going to go into to college with a specific focus, make sure the industry you're going into is good. So a story I have on this is my colleague, one of his friends, just graduated college, and he went in with the idea that he wanted to go into the oil and gas field, right? And when people are listening to this many years down the road, they're going to really laugh at this. But for me, being in the renewable energy space, it's hilarious because oil and gas is just plummeting, right? It's not good right now. It's not going to be a continuing industry because there will be always probably some extent there will be something there, but it's not the type of past that it has. And as a result, he's put all of this focus on it, and now he has to completely pivot because the industry he wanted to go into is no longer growing. So when you're doing this, try to talk to some people in a various, wide range of backgrounds and experiences to see what areas, like what industries are growing. And that's why I said earlier, electrical engineering is a great thing, because if I think about the mechanics of today. Like I have a couple uncles who are mechanics, car mechanics, and if they don't, luckily for them, they're close enough to retirement that they probably won't have to make a pivot, because by the time car mechanics really start to have a hard time finding work, they'll be retiring. But for younger people who are in their 20s and 30s who are mechanics, you need to start shifting your mindset, because electric cars are coming. This different type of economy is coming. So focus on what's changing, the major trends, and then be sure to be in line with those. Because if you're trying to go against the grain, like it's against the grain of what is happening on an economic scale, it's going to be difficult. Did you have any thoughts on that? Because I want to go into a little bit about PhDs in a second here.
Yeah. And that I just want to say that for any of those developers and are into like mechanics and stuff, that doesn't mean you can't still go after that. I get that we are moving towards the electric car and that's all shifting, but there will always, I think, there's always going to be a need for people who can specialize in those things. And so if you want to, you can still build a brand and a business around that. It's going to be a little more nuanced in the future, but it's still a potential. It's still a possibility. It doesn't mean like it's crushed your dreams or anything. But to the point I think we made in a previous podcast or episode was that it's America. You can literally make a career out of anything you want. So you don't need college stamp of approval to do that, especially farther down the road. But yeah, I just want to say that before we jumped into the PhD. So I'll turn that back over to you.
That is a good point, and it's definitely worth like kind of correcting myself slightly on. Is that don't be discouraged by what we say if any means. I just want to make sure people realize that if you're going to go to college, try to use it to really actually leverage you and get you ahead of the crowd. And always be, for example, with mechanics, like always be looking out for those trends, because that can help you. Because maybe you're the mechanic who really knows his stuff, and there's still going to be cars around for, these mechanical cars around for a long time. So make a YouTube channel of it. Like show people how to fix their cars. Like you can diversify your business in so many ways. Don't forget about that as well. That's obviously a little bit off topic, but the one thing I wanted to talk about again is kind of PhDs. So it really comes down to not necessarily the PhD, but I've seen in what I'm doing, specifically when it comes to new technologies, there's a couple people who are extremely interesting, and as a result have been able to become well-known in the field. And that's, for example, clean tech. So carbon capture is an example of these people who have studied this and have then gone on to do their PhD and have studied the specific area. And I think that I would say that these people, I don't know necessarily if the cost benefit analysis is going to come out for them. But what I will say is those people are motivated by knowledge and learning and moving things forward. So that's another thing to remember from the previous episode is if your true motivations are not how much money you're going to make, right? Obviously, we don't want people to be in significant debt because that puts a lot of stress on them. But if you're super motivated to be studying and researching this cutting edge technology, then acknowledge that, because that's definitely important, right? We don't want to discredit that. But just know that there are negative effects to going into a lot of debt, right? If you get a scholarship, that's amazing. The one person I specifically am thinking of, she ended up having a scholarship to study at this amazing place. And as a result, she didn't have to pay for that part of her education. But now she's a leading person in her field because she's studying all these new things and she's able to be a thought leader. So I guess maybe the point to draw from this is that when going to university became a big deal, it was not a lot of people went to it. So then going to 2 years or 4 years of school, you were set above the rest, right? And that's what college is supposed to do, is set you above the rest, right? Now, the bar has been essentially raised in the education realm. So you need to go to a master's, or even a master's. Like, there's so many people who have a master's degree in something. Like, I can't tell you how many people I talk to who have a master's. So it's just a matter of like realizing if you want to use education as the point where you're raising the bar, you're probably going to have to significantly invest in it. So what are your thoughts on that kind of the bar, and whether it's education or other areas? What are your thoughts there?
My thoughts are, yes, I absolutely get what you're saying. And I think you're right there in a lot of things, like, getting that PhD, it makes you an expert in that field. And the cost benefit analysis, sometimes it pays out, sometimes it really doesn't. I mean, personally, I know my dad has I think it's his MBA or his PhD, I forget which, but by the time he got it, he was later in his life, never really used it. I know I have some cousins and they just got their PhD and hasn't done anything for them yet. But what it does do, financially speaking, what it does do though, is it makes you an expert in that field. And I completely stand behind becoming an expert in whatever it is you're hoping to do. So whether that be a PhD or the fact that you read and consume everything there is on this subject isn't different to me. I know in your role, you probably have to look for those people with those degrees or those experiences, but you can still build a brand and you can still build that awareness around you without just a PhD. Yes, it looks fancy to have that next to your name. Still, personally, it's not how I'd spend my time. I mean, I love learning, and I think that you don't need a classroom or a teacher necessarily to tell you how to do that.
Yeah. I think that, we definitely have to, for the people listening, if we're just talking, saying that college isn't always the best answer, in probably a lot of cases it's not, what are the alternatives, right? So we know, obviously, Michael and I have both gone through the Praxis program, which was essentially a college alternative. But aside from that, you can literally, as long as you decide what's important to you, again, going back to deciding what's important to you, laying that foundation, using that, you can choose what you want as a goal. Eventually, we're going to get to that in a little bit in another episode. But once you have decided what your goal is, then you just start to, like you said, consume content, surround yourself with people in that space, and then you can just start to become an expert just by virtue of being in it, right? The reason why Jason Calacanis, is that how you say his last name, is considered an expert in investing in unicorns is because he's invested in so many successful startups, right? It's not because he studied it specifically in college or anything like that. He went and he did, and he surrounded himself by it, and he has the experience. So if you want to, do anything, you can just start consuming a lot of content, reading the books, like you said, talking to the people in the industry, reaching out to them on LinkedIn, doing just networking. And, I think Joe Rogan's a good example of this. Like, he is an example of somebody who he knows enough to be dangerous about pretty much everything, it seems, because he talks to everybody, right? So if you talk to people of one sort, eventually you're going to become a sort of expert in that field. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's another point that just something I wanted to throw in. It's slightly anecdotal, but I work in the design space for like UX UI design, and I talk to people all the time who are in that space. And recently, I've been talking to a lot more people who don't have degrees, but who have been in this space for years on end, and they know, like, they're the experts in that field. They know, they've used every tool, they know that inside and out. But it fascinates me when I speak to these people and they're like, yeah, no, I never went to college. They're like, even back then when it was still like the main thing to do, like, yeah, no, just, I didn't do it. I thought that learning and the experiences that I gained from doing it would actually be more beneficial. And I love hearing those stories. And I think that, you know, when deciding whether or not to go to college, that's something also, you know, keep in mind that it's you can do both. And it's not an either or. It just depends on those goals and where you want to go with your life, and then making the best choice for you to get there.
Another thing that I want to jump in with is, you know, with people. So one thing that I've gathered specifically from engineers in my experience with recruitment is that the engineers who end up getting the highest paid and who end up getting the best jobs are the people who have that technical skills, technical expertise that they've gained through experience. I mean, obviously, you know, if you studied batteries in college, like, that's good. But once you've worked for Tesla on their battery division or for some of these other companies, you become extremely valuable, right? And so it's that technical expertise, but paired with people skills. So I think that it's important to remember that you can, like, if you're an engineer, if you want to design, you know, if you want to, you know, be the best engineer in one specific space, learn those skills, but also don't be afraid of, you know, taking a sales job early on in your career to hone those people skills, because people skills can help you gain more opportunities to then gain the right technical expertise, right? So having that balance of technical skills versus people skills is very important. And some people will object to that, saying, "Oh, I'm just not a people person." It's like, no, everybody is a human. We all have people skills. We have to develop them. Don't make excuses. Just like we don't want you to make excuses for not being in charge of your life, don't make excuses for your personality. You can help to develop certain areas of your personality to become a more well-rounded person and to help be very nimble on your feet when it comes to the career side of things. And then kind of on that note with being nimble, I think that, you know, you see it it's specifically relevant with startups, right? The whole agile mindset of going through, figuring out the flaws. Like, I think Elon Musk says it really great. I don't know specifically the quote, but essentially, when you learn that failing is okay and you just try to get through and figure it out as fast as possible, that's what essentially sets you apart from the rest, right? If you're trying to get it perfect on the first shot, you're likely not going to do it. I mean, you're not going to get it perfect on the first shot. Like, let's be totally honest. But if you can have a good iteration cycle where you go through, you create a product, you can identify the issues and then fix it and then do it better the next time, that's going to be good. And I think the same thing is true of your education, what you self-educate, your personality. Everything has to be on a relatively short iteration cycle of constantly revisiting it, say, okay, what areas can I fix? What's going wrong? What's going on here? So I can be nimble in my life and in my career, so I can get towards this goal that I'm seeking towards, a balanced life in my 4 areas where I'm happy and content in other things. Yeah, I guess that's kind of that kind of concludes most of my thoughts here for this episode. What other things? I feel like I want to leave it off to you to top it off here.
Well, okay, just to that last point you made there about, you know, people skills. I really think that, you know, that's something that's underspoken that people don't really realize. Is so when I was working at SpaceX and I was talking to these engineers, they could tell that I'm not stupid. I was pretty bright. I picked up on a lot of what was being said. Like, I never worked in the engineering field, but I could connect the dots and I got what was happening. And time again, can't really tell you how many times they were like, dude, if you actually became an engineer, because you can, obviously, based off of like how fast you're picking this stuff up, in our conversations, you're like, you would probably be one of the best engineers because you can also talk to people and because you have people skills. And so I think that whether or not you do decide to go to college, realize it's not an end all be all. It's not an end destination. Like if you go, it's great, good for you. If that's what's great for you. If you don't, great, fantastic, good for you. You'll get some negative feedback, but that's fine. It's not an end all be all, and you have to realize that you're making these decisions based off of your goals, what you want out of life, and what is best for you at the time and place. Sometimes that is, sometimes that isn't college. And I think it should be very, that's what we should probably end this one on. That, and no matter where you go in life, you will always be dealing with people. So to harp on what you just said there a little more, always work on understanding yourself, how you relate with others, your people skills, and how to work as a functioning unit, regardless, because that is one of the many elements that will help you succeed and stand head and shoulders above others in whatever field, category, degree, whatever you go after. Having those skills, building that reputation, that's what's going to set you apart, not necessarily your bachelor's in sociology and liberal arts.
Yep, I think that just the last thing then to end there would be that I just want to, if you're going to go to college, I feel like it has to be a full send. Like, just do it. I know it's so cliche, but like, if you're going to do it well. Don't just go there for the experience. Don't go specifically. If you don't know what you want, I highly recommend not going. If you're really wishy-washy about what you're going for and your motivations, take a year or two to work, try different jobs. That is going to be so beneficial for you. So full send if you're going to do it, but if you're really not certain, maybe wait. So
wait, one last thing, Silas. I mean, we can end this here, but now I have a question for you. Did you go to college?
So I did not go to college. And did you want a reason behind that?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
I did not go to college. It is partially because I was raised in a family where there wasn't really a whole lot of emphasis put on college, right? My dad, in fact, was pretty negative towards what college does, mainly from a faith standpoint. He's like, oh, it's just going to rip you of your faith. Like, it's going to strip you of your faith. It's going to be difficult. So I didn't really ever have a positive outlook on it. And I had no idea, like I had nothing specifically that I wanted to go for, right? I had no, and this partially is because the opportunities to see and experience new things were slightly lower compared to some people. Like I didn't even know about so many careers. Like I had no idea that they existed. If I had, there's a good chance I would have gone to college, but I didn't. And I've essentially decided that I'm not going to go to college, but instead the same 4 years that other people spend in getting their degree, I'm going to spend getting my life degree, right? I'm going to get it in the things that interest me. And those things are constantly changing, but that's okay, right? I'm not the kind of person who can set, all right, I'm going to go do this to get this degree in this thing. And I'm going to be set, I'm going to stick with that for 4 years. I don't know if you're a person listening who can do that, kudos to you. But I know that I cannot keep one thing focused. If I was 18 and I decided I'm going to do this, it would have not been right.
All right. Now, you didn't go to college. Do you think that you're going to be any less successful for it? Have you had any experiences to suggest that? And what roadblocks have you run into?
I would say that in reality, I feel like I'm going to be more successful because I didn't go to college. Because for me specifically, it's really opened up. It's really opened up a lot of ideas, right? I haven't been set in a certain mindset, so that kind of is freeing. But in reality, like I make very good money for a person who did not go to college. I make above the average for an American. I pretty much have my entire adult life, except for a couple of transition years. So I've just always made good money. So I'm successful in that regards. But I'm also very happy because I've found something that's interesting to me, and I found it in a relatively short period of time. Right, 21 years old, found it this type of work that I love, and I didn't have an issue getting the job because I didn't have a degree, right? It was my people skills that did it. And I can truly admit that any of the jobs that I would have had access to through a college degree are probably jobs that I don't want. Like, because I want to be an entrepreneur, right? Entrepreneur, and I want to be a business owner. And I think that for most entrepreneurs and business owners, going to business school specifically, which is a lot of entrepreneurs do that, is probably a complete waste of time, because you can learn by doing business and running a business, or helping somebody, being their third in command, run a business. You can learn way more in a very short period of time with consequences, but also with financial upside in doing so. So I guess to answer your question, has it hindered me? Not at all. I don't think so. If anything, it's helped accelerate, because if I had gone to college, I'd still be somewhere else for at least one more year. So I think it's been pretty great, actually.
Perfect. And I think that would be a great note to end this on, because like, living proof, you don't need it. But if it's right for you, go for it. We're not here to tell you how to live your life. We're just trying to help you live deliberately and make the best decisions you can.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you on the next show.